How y'all doing? Tim's waiting if know if he's going to come and yeah. He knows there's always somebody who comes up afterwards, so he's just sort of waiting for it. Right? Yeah. Unless you come forward, that won't happen. You're the trigger. Yeah. Mm-mm. What's that? Oh, you're saying you're not coming up. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Just another day, huh? Well, first, we don't normally have to do any kind of announcement, but no flight deck next Thursday, okay? Kim and I are on TDY to Glory of Zion in Dallas, Texas, Corinth, Texas. So encourage you if you get a chance to watch that online. That's always got a lot of revelation going on it. But I won't go tonight, but we've talked before about alignment works on the 3 R's. It's revelation, okay, it's relationship, and it's resources. And there's a flow that goes up and back. And so we try to make sure that we're out there and connecting on the relationship part. We stay connected on revelation and resources and all, but that's part of what we do. So I don't know if you remember, I don't know if Walter Cronkite did it or somebody, but it seems to me I can hear this sort of as a kid going, this day in history. Did any of you, was that Walter Cronkite? Okay. He used to do that. I mean, for those of you who never got any Walter Cronkite, I'm so sorry, because he had a voice. I mean, really, he had a voice and a presence that just made you feel like, okay, somebody sane is sitting in the seat there. Okay. Was a good guy. So I pulled this day in history, just so you know, was the day in 1775 when the midnight ride of Paul Revere happened. Kind of interesting. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and it's when the Doolittle raid happened on Tokyo. Big thing. But back up a bit, and it's the day when the great San Francisco earthquake hit. Just devastated that place out pretty big time, right? So it's interesting, this day in history. Those are memory points, and you kind of go, wow, that's kind of amazing. Well, this day recorded in Scripture is the 10th day in the first month, okay? And how many of you got the ping and read it? Okay, some of you did, some of you don't. So that's why I always kind of have to begin here, assuming that some of you didn't prep, so that's cool. So let me just tell you, because when God timestamps thing on a very specific day, and we happen to be meeting on that very day, so today is the 10th day of the first month, okay? And so we pay attention to that when I'm prepping. I'm like, okay, God, I'm not sure what you got for this Thursday. And I just look on the biblical calendar and I go, okay, well, I think that sort of determines it. Just 3 little trifling things happen on this day. It's Lamb Selection Day in Egypt, when they had to choose the lamb to prepare for the angel of death and be ready to move. Fast forward, Israel crosses the Jordan led by the ark on this very same day, the 10th day of the first month. Fast forward again, and on this very day, Jesus rides into Jerusalem to the cries of Hosanna, and to others, shut up. Right? You get that. But for us, unlike simple history past to be remembered, and all of those are things, but we believe that God's put them in Scripture because He's aligned and set them in time as transactions present. So what in the world do those things have to do with you, if any? Most of the churches celebrated past, Easter, the crucifixion and resurrection. And just so you know, it says, don't let anybody judge you about the celebration of days or whatever. They're foreshadows of things to come. So I'm not uptight about that, okay? But I feel like when God puts His thumb on it, and when we are meeting on the very day of that, I go, okay, you have my attention. So, because He has said, these are my appointed times of the Lord. And later, another place in Deuteronomy, He says, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God in the place which He chooses, at the feast of unleavened bread, which is about to happen, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. God says, I've got divine appointments. How many of you go to the dentist with some? Don't admit that. Go ahead. But if the dentist has their way, how often do they have you back there? Every 6 months, right? Yeah. Unless you're Mike and Jackie, whose son is a dentist, and then you go whenever the heck you want, right? So family discounts are pretty good. I brought you into this world. You're going to pull this tooth. No, anyway. Yeah. Yeah, 6 months. And why do they do that? Just to make money? Sure. No. Right? It's a matter of we got to check up and see how your health is. And there's assumption you're taking care of your teeth in between, but you got to have those times when there's a formal transaction rather than just, oh, I hurt, my tooth hurts, and you call up the dentist for an emergency. God has set these appointed times so that his people would come up and there would be a divine transaction and a remembrance and a connection with him that they didn't have in the rest of the time. So I just want to look at these three events, I think, fairly quickly and try to see what you pull out. And we're going to just let some of the word wash over you and kind of pull it from there. So this. Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, that is the first month, every man shall take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the doorposts, 2 doorposts, and on the lintel of the houses where they eat. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. And thus you shall eat it, with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. Okay, so this formally happens on our current calendar, would be on Monday. Okay, Monday evening would be that Passover. But the Lord is saying more. Let me just finish up the rest of this text. For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Pretty heavy-duty warning, right? Okay. And we've gone through times, even recently with COVID-19 and all that kind of stuff, where people were really paying more attention now about the blood, okay? And what kind of plague of death going to, pass by and so forth. There's power in it, and the enemy absolutely hates it. 2 times a year when God really brings a focus of clarity upon the blood. One is Passover and the other's at Tabernacles. Okay, and they're 6 months apart, interestingly. One has to do with pulling us out of sin, pulling Israel out of Egypt. The other is about maintaining a relationship with a holy God. You get out by the blood, but you stay in connection by the blood again. So powerful. But here's my question. Why did God have them pick a lamb out on the 10th? Okay, I mean, he could have just said, look, on the 14th, on the afternoon, go out and find your lamb. Bring it in and kill it. See, I'm always asking these questions. Okay, why did he do that? Why did he align that event with when they cross the Jordan with when Jesus enters? Okay, well, 1 and 3 I kind of get, but I'm not sure about this. So I spend a lot of time, because he's just not casual with time or cavalier about his word, right? He puts things specifically. Well, for one, the blood is always, always about the life. Okay? The life is in the blood. And life is never supposed to be removed, impersonal, analytical, or cold. And so he made sure there were 4 days where they could see the life, share the life, and value the life. Because if you don't, the blood is just sort of some objective thing out there. It's not personal. Only once 4 days, then the sacrifice has meaning. It's the blood of the life. Does this make sense? He understood his people enough to know, you know what, I got to make this personal. I got to have this little guy come into the house from the fields and hang out so the kids can play with it and feed it. And it becomes not just a sheep, but it becomes the lamb, right? It's different. It's personal. Now, they're in an agrarian society, so they're okay, with dealing with the blood and everything else, unlike most of us except Christy. And except Tim, because Tim deals with blood all the time. In business, it's just the way it is, right? Does this make some sense? Why the 10th? Because you got to bring it in close and personal. And we're going to come back to that again. But then there's this always part, too, that I'm just kind of intrigued about. Why in haste? He gives them very specific instructions. This is not a leisurely meal, folks. This is not just hang around. You are prepared to flee. Because when God has set a countdown, be prepared to launch. Hello? He'd been building up the pressure on Pharaoh, and it was about to the tipping point. And if any of you know about the timing of things, when things get to a tipping point, you need to get it done. Too often things get to a tipping point and we delay. And what happens? It just slides back. And he had also been building up the pressure within his people specifically so they would not remain or delay. Hello. So I just want to bring this to you that sometimes, you heard this phrase, right? Hurry up and wait. Okay. Sometimes it's not quite that way. 80 years in prep for Moses, 40 years in the court, 40 in the pasture. He's uniquely prepared. He's uniquely qualified. He has favor and failures. And this whole thing is one massive, long wind-up. Because what it really is wait and then hurry up. How many of you been in the wait and then hurry up? Okay. If you've been in the wait stages, I'm just saying, be ready. It's been forever. It's been years. It's been decades. Oh, Lord, when is this ever going to happen? And all of a sudden you hear 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, yeah? Wait. Yeah. And I've taught on this before. I'm just going to touch on it briefly, but I think it's amazing what God does over that period of time and how he squeezes things down, because it's never really easy to leave, especially when you've been in a place for 430 some years, generation after generation after generation. And it takes something to shift, because familiarity breeds contempt. Yeah, but sometimes familiarity just breeds comfort. I'm familiar with it. I know where the well is. I know who's got the best leaks. Come on. Newton's first law is a body at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Okay, so here's a question. We have a carrier as a model. How do you launch a 32,000-pound plane down a 100-yard runway? 300 feet, 32,000 pounds in 2 seconds. By the way, okay. By the way, any of you sneezed recently? How fast is it that when you sneeze it comes out? 100 miles an hour? It's just sort of amazing. Okay. Yeah, when you sneeze out, it's just like... how do they measure that? I'm not sure. With me, they would just put a little meter here on how my head recoils. It's like, okay. Yeah, it was about 100 miles an hour. But bottom line, the way a carrier does this is by great amounts of pressure. So the launch process is amazing. There's a 300-foot runway versus if you're landing on a normal runway for Air Force pilots is 3,200 2,300 feet, okay? I have fun talking with Jeff Landreth, who's an Air Force pilot, and he has jokes about what they do with Navy pilots. And they're like, yeah, we've got 2,300 feet to land on. You got to land on a postage stamp. And then we hang up our gear and we go in and hit a couple of bars. You go down into the galley and drink beer or something, right? It's like, right? It's just sort of, but it's amazing. And it goes to 0 to 160 miles an hour in 2 seconds. And it requires two things. Yeah, 1,001, 1,002, 160 miles an hour. It requires being at full throttle and a catapult, okay? And this is a critical piece. It's called a holdback bar. Because what happens when they get the plane on there, you see its lash, you've got a blast door here, blast shield, okay, deflector. That goes up to what they call full military power, okay? You can see how intense that is. And so what that does, that thrust back is pushing this plane. The plane in and of itself is just longing to go. This is some of you, okay? But there's that holdback bar right there, just holding it back, okay? But it's like, it's building up. It's like, come on, okay? So meanwhile, though, if they just release that holdback bar and let the plane go, it would go right off the end. It can't launch itself in that short a time. So instead, they've got to press up on the catapult to build up by this steam, and now they're using electromagnets, but it creates a whole other level of pressure, and they've got to read it just right. That's why each time there'll be a guy out there with a placard saying how heavy that particular plane is based on the fuel and its munitions, okay? Because if they give the wrong number, if they put too much pressure on that catapult and it goes off, it'll snap the front gear off. But if they don't have enough pressure on it, it won't launch. It'll go off the edge and down, okay? So they get those there and they wait till it builds up, and the catapult is getting ready in pressure. Here's the verse that connects with it. Now the Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. And when he does, he will drive you out completely. So there was the pressure in Israel of just being weary of the burden of slavery that was building and building. It got more intense when Moses shows up. Okay, because you got to remember the first few plagues hit everybody. But before that, he has a nice conversation with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, yeah, okay, you're just wasting time, so let him make bricks without straw. Okay? They're thoroughly ticked off at Moses. The pressure is building and building, but it's got to build on Pharaoh as well until that holdback bar breaks, thrust is, and it's out. 160 miles an hour in 2 seconds. So bottom line, the successful launching of an aircraft requires a couple of things. A buildup of the pressure within, a buildup of the pressure without, and a holdback so the timing is absolutely correct. Okay, so here's the reality. When God is setting you to cross over to something, typically he will let the pressure build from within. There's something in you. You're sick and tired of this. You're done with that. You just need I can't deal with this boss anymore. I'm done with this. Okay, that starts to build up. And then so often, much to our chagrin, he builds the pressure without. But the timing has to be right. So often God's sitting there just like holding you back. Come on, God, let me at it. Nope, not yet. You got to go to full military grade power. You know, sorry, if some of you grew up with the old cartoons, Wile E. Coyote, being held in place with his legs rolling like that and then let go. Copy? So be aware, pressures within, pressure without, and the holdback. You stay in the timing of the Lord. But remember, too often we're ready to decide that those pressures within are something of the enemy, or our inadequacy or our sin, and the pressures without are the enemy attack. Okay, You have to get this. God, I could go back in all the studies on that, and he hardens Pharaoh's heart, the holdback bar, in order to keep the pressure going. Keep the pressure going. Okay, builds it up, because he is releasing judgment against all the gods of Egypt, so that when Israel gets out of there, they go, man, our God reigns. He took care of every one of those. And I've gone through before showing you the 10 plagues and how each one was targeted at a different god of Egypt. God's making a huge statement. Okay, you got a little bit from that? You good? We're going to fast forward now 40 years to this episode. So Joshua said to the children of Israel, come and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, by this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will, without fail, drive out from before you the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Perizzites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth. Did you just catch that phrase? I'm sorry. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth. Not some little Egyptian deity, not your little hobby horse, not your little personal philosophy. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man from each tribe. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, and the waters shall come down from upstream, and they shall stand as a heap. So it was when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. As those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaretan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. This happened today, folks. Come on. God's calendar, not mine. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. I'm not just making this up, okay? I didn't write this. And those 12 stones which they took up out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over the Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord that is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Okay? So, wife eat first. One of the things you have to do is you compare and contrast, right? When he took them through the Red Sea, did they put their feet in the water? No, didn't get anywhere close it. Moses stood there with the staff. See, there's times when he breaks us out, and we are passive, basically. We're just along for the ride. He's basically leading us by the nose. Some of you kick against that, but a lot of times it's like, just sit down, watch and see, right, what I'm going to do. But then there's times when he's like, okay, you're no longer an infant. You put your right foot in. But here's the problem. Then you take your right foot out. You put your left foot in. No, I take my left foot out. Some of you are wondering where that is. Bottom line, there's a necessity as you grow, and when you want to cross into a promise where you got to put skin in the game, folks. That was a phrase from my years in business. It just means you got to have money you got to have some risk. Okay? It's the reason that it was a real challenge at times. Consultants could be great help, but so often they had no skin in the game. They tell you all sorts of things to do. But if you did or didn't do it, they still got paid. Okay? Like a stockbroker or something. Or a bookie. You're probably more familiar with that, especially Will back there. So anyway, you got to have skin in the game. Bottom line, okay, the first on the 10th is about getting them launched out. The second mention of the 10th is about them getting in. One is by the blood of the Lamb is necessary, but now they got to step into it, and so often now we're going to have to step into the problem in faith. What is your Jordan River? What is the thing that is the barrier from you and the promise God has given you? Do you know what it is? Do you even know what the promise is? Hello? Maybe not. Go back. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking about this. If you're not sure what he's crossing you into, you got to go before him. And if nothing else, if you're not sure there's something out there, there's something in here. Okay? When Scripture refers to land, this is the first place it means. This is the land. And so if you want a very simple challenge, just go down the fruit of the Spirit and stop when you hit one you really don't work in. That won't take long. Love, okay. Joy, peace, patience. Oh. Jace was texting me some questions about, okay, if the fruit of the Spirit's supposed to be in us, what's the deal? Why is it so hard? So because it's fruit. It's not byproducts, not add-ons. It's fruit. And so you got to nurture the tree. Where are your roots? How well are you taking it? Are you okay with getting pruned? Because frankly, John 15 makes it very clear. Okay, you want more fruit, you're going to have to get pruned. Some of you are old enough you prune regularly, but never mind. Okay, you have to be able to step into the problem. Okay, so often, oh God, I want to break through in this new thing. Okay, well, where is your skin in the game? What are you risking? What's the phone call you need to make? What's the application you need to take? What's the cash you got to take out and put into whatever? Hello? Oh God, just move me into the next thing. Actually, there's a funny episode back in Exodus, right? Because the people are all upset because Pharaoh's armies are crushing down them, and they're freaking out. And Moses goes, don't worry about it. Stand still and see the force of your God. And God says, literally God says, why are you talking to me? Tell him to move. I'm sorry, it's just one of the funniest things. What? Come on. Get him to move. They don't have to get in the Red Sea. I'm going to do that. But move on. Stop complaining. Hello. The way out of Egypt was very narrow. There was water on both sides, okay? What's interesting is that the way into the promise actually was broad. Because in the Red Sea, it's divided, and the water's on either side. This time, God just stops the water up there, quite a distance, and lets the rest of it just run out. And what that does is it creates this incredibly broad path to walk in. You need to hear this, because this is one of the key things that the Lord was telling me. The way out is narrow, but the way into the promise is broad. Hello? But you're going to have to put your feet in the water. The Lamb is the way out, but the presence is the way in. Right? The way out of Egypt was the Passover lamb and what that broke open. But now it's the ark that carries the presence and the glory that leads the way. You tracking? You just, okay. I'll make sure. This is an interesting thing that he had him take 12 stones out of the center of the Jordan as a memorial. Okay, so here's just a question. Because this happened on this day, what trophy do you take in order to remember what God's done to pull you into the promise? What trophy from what was the barrier? You get that these rocks weren't just taken from that side of the Jordan to that side. He said, I want you to take it from right in the middle where the priest stood. Some of this is clicking for you, some not. All I'm saying, when you put your feet in the water, be aware, when God moves it, there are going to be trophies there. You need to take something. You need to take something, because these stand as a memorial. These stand as a testimony. These stand as a witness to say, my God is faithful. You know, the problem we have so often about trying to cross the next river, the next boundary, is we haven't set anything up on the last time. And our memories are so short. We forgot how he saved our bacon out of the last time, how he broke it open, how he made a way when there wasn't a way, how he made a way when we weren't even looking, hardly. We backed into it, and it opened up. Okay? I was serious. Years ago, when I made a career change, I backed into it. And suddenly he just created this whole thing. Now, but I had to be moving, but he opened a whole other direction for me, 25 years in business. We also do it in order to build our testimony and in order to show and tell the next generation that God is indeed faithful. Tracking so far? You okay? So 2 episodes, both on the 10th. Let's go to the third one. This one you know pretty well. They brought the donkey and the colt, laid their clothes on them, and set him on them, and a very great multitude spread their clothes on the road. Others cut down branches from the trees and spread them on the road. Then the multitudes who went before and those who followed cried, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he had come into Jerusalem, all the city was moved. The word there is actually stirred. It's like a gut level thing. Who is this? So the multitude said, This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. That happened today, folks. Or whatever the institutional church did and rearranged it on a Sunday, which I get. It's helpful. Get everybody together. You can celebrate it. But it's today. Can you imagine being there? Can you imagine Jesus riding in on that, knowing what the next 4 days? But then I love this. Jesus actually clears the temple 2 times. First time, John 2, at the beginning of the ministry. But he goes right on the heels of this when he is being recognized as the Son of David, which is a messianic title. That name, that being sung out there had to send shudders through a lot of people. It would have gotten the attention of the Praetorian Guard, who understood what it meant, right? This is the next verse in that. Then Jesus went into the temple right after this. No beat in the scripture. Then Jesus went into the temple of God and drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, It is written, My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. Then the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. Janet, I want you to pay attention that it is on this date specifically that we are told that blind came to him and they healed him, and he healed them. We often don't have a specific date when Jesus does things. We do on this. I was thinking about you this morning. Don't you love, though, let me just add one other thing in here, because I think it's so important, because it connects back to the second event. There are other details. If you have to read all 4 Gospels to get all the various parts of the transactions on that day that he rode in. But Luke adds this, and some of the Pharisees called to him from the crowd, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. But he answered them and said to them, I tell you that if these should keep silent, the stones would immediately cry out. And as he drew near, he saw the city and he wept over it. This all happens today, folks. So, question again, why the 10th? Let me just add one thing or connect one thing because I think it's interesting. Like the stones that Joshua took out, it's about a witness that these very stones would cry out. God doesn't put details in for no reason. The stones that he mentions on the 10th when Joshua's going over and the stones that Jesus mentions on the 10th are connected. It's about a witness, about what they bear witness to. Jesus is saying, you can try and stop them, but they're going to bear witness. The rocks themselves will. Why the 10th? Because Jesus came through the sheep gate as the lamb. And because, like the first time, it is up close and personal. It's one thing to not have met Jesus. All you do is you've heard about him. And then he's crucified. Oh, yeah, well, it happens to the worst of us, huh? It's another when it's up close and personal, when he's come that intimate to you, to where you can see him, talk to him, and he stays in the temple and he heals the lame and the blind. What was it like to get your sight on Lamb Selection Day? All of Jerusalem was already in a Passover mode. You get this. Passover doesn't formally start for 4 days, but right now they're in the mode because this is Lamb Selection Day. That's the reason that Jesus had to go in and clear out the money changers, because people were coming to Jerusalem that 3 times a year, right? And they were having to buy approved lambs at a big markup. And it just burns his hide that they're doing that. So you get this real sense of who he is. And here's the fact. We often like how Jesus shows up when he's gentle as the lamb, or not so much when he takes up the whip as the lion. Yeah? No? So what about you in this day? This day reminds us that the blood is personal, it's intimate, and it's known. If his blood is too objective and rational, that's incredibly dangerous, folks. When you get to a point where he's just a figurine hanging up on a cross and there's no personal contact with him, then it's pretty abstract. There's a reason that God wanted Israel to have close contact. This baby's 9 weeks old. And you could take a sheep or a goat, okay? See, it's one thing just to get some blood out there. It's another thing to have an animal with you, connect to you, that you love on. Yeah. That you smell. You see, we're supposed to understand that when we come into the time of Passover about Jesus, to the point to which it's just a very rational, logical, cold, removed thing. It is just not going to have the impact. So God parades Jesus into Jerusalem on the 10th today, because he needs them to see the real thing. He needs to not just be some crazy man out there in the wilderness. He needs them to be up close and personal. You going to be able to hear the rest of what I say, or are you just transfigured? Probably not. Yes. The blood breaks the back of the enemy, but we have to move, folks. Whatever is holding you back, the blood of the Lamb breaks the back of the enemy, okay? But we got to be ready to go. And even though some have waited a very long time, you must be ready to roll. Eat it like you're ready to just fly out the door immediately. Next, Jesus is absolutely fierce about the purity of his Father's house. That would be you, because you are now the temple of the King. It is on this day that he goes in and cleans house. So, let him do that. If you're from a traditional Jewish home, you would be spending time right now getting rid of all the leaven out of your house. Okay? No leaven anywhere. Got to be all cleared out. So here's the question. Are you comfortable with Jesus as the lamb as you are the lion, or the lion as you are the lamb? A lot of believers will just kind of go one way. He's just Jesus meek and mild, or he's just Jesus kick ass and take names. And frankly, he's both. You're going to have to deal with that. The blood brings us out, but it's the presence that takes you in. Hello? The blood takes you out. It's the presence that takes you in. And we are required to get into the barrier, the problem, the river, before it opens up. Don't just sit there and stand and say, open sesame. You got to put skin in the game. You got to put your feet in. By the way, there's rabbinical commentary that say that while the water began to recede, it didn't hold up completely until they'd gotten in up to their necks. Some of you know that experience. Hello? Don't just put a toe in there, folks. You got once you step in, keep going. And by the way, leverage the pressure within and without that's within you and that's without. Let it work for you. Okay? Because we're in this time. It is the 10th day of the first month. It is a doorway through. It's a doorway into crossing over. It's a transition. It's about the Lamb because it's the way you get out of where you were. And it's about the presence of God, the holiness, about Him leading the way. It's about the power of the Lion of Judah. And the picture of this young woman is she's just distracted and just walking along. We can't do that. We have to be this way. We got to be ready, willing, and able to walk over because, frankly, this is not just another day. And it's not just another season. And so we have to be ready. Did you get something out of this? Very strange that God aligns those three very different events kind of thing on the 10th day. Father, thank you for your word, that it is amazing and deep. And Lord, I have so just skimmed the surface of all of this. But Father, use your word to take each person here deeper into it. And Lord, I think there's some confusion as to what you want them to cross. What's the barrier? And so you need to speak by your Spirit into that, Lord, so they know. And then make it clear they get out by the blood, they get in by the presence. You are faithful and true, Lord, and let us not be removed from any intimacy with Jesus. Let us be close to him so that we understand how personal, how intimate his shed blood is to us and for us. And we pray this all in the name of Jesus. Amen.